Justin, welcome. Good to spend time with you today. When you look back at kind of the journey you've had, and you and I have had a chance to talk before the podcast, but if you look back, what first drew you into leadership and what made you want to build something bigger than yourself?
I think at first it was just an ability to leave an impact on the world, make sure that my time here was useful and at least affected as many people as practical in a positive way. And well, really the only way to do that is really hard to be a single contributor and change the face of the earth. There's only so many Einsteins, so many Newtons, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to go down that route. Well, so the next best thing is to find what you're good at, assemble a right team, and continue pushing forward until you and your team are the best.
That's awesome. And so, give us a little of your origin story, how you came to found or be the founder of ProShip. I know there's as usual for most entrepreneurs, kind of a long winding path to get there. Kind of give us yours and a little bit of kind of what was along the way.
Well, I've told this story enough times. I think I've simplified a little bit. I was lucky enough to do well as a young man when in school. Joined the Navy. The Navy's like, "Hey, how do you like nuclear power?" I'm like, "That sounds amazing. I would love to learn more about the inner depths of that of at the subatomic level there, as well as the chemistry associated with it. It was really along the lines for me there." But of course, when you're in the military, you can't help but be taught leadership, communication, and in the case of nuclear power, systems isolation, systems engineering, and basically just systems thinking overall. How does um, it's one of those, butterfly flaps its wings and then, a hurricane happens somewhere else, right? That whole sequence of events, why it would happen. And you don't do it for the purpose of, you don't do that thought process for the purpose of being smart. You do it for the purpose of understanding when things start to cascadingly fail. How do you cut it off? And then how do you subsequently roll back such that you can power the ship, the enterprise, in my case, empower high speed, small volume, high speed, small parcel shipping. So when I got out of the Navy, I ended up staying as a naval subcontractor, learned even more about how larger organizations work, mostly the Department of Defense. Um, and then had a friend of mine that I was in the Navy with that we took to software engineering late in our naval career, and he's like, "Hey, I got a job up here in Chicago doing small parcel shipment execution. Why don't you come with?" Rapidly found out that my follow style did not work well with their leadership style. Um, Four of us decided that we would do a significantly better job of making the customers happy, and therefore we founded a company with that purpose. Now, one of the advantages of starting a company with a bunch of engineers is we don't know what we didn't know. So we created new technology that was markedly different than what was in the industry at that point in time. One of the difficult things about being four engineers starting a company is you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah.
namely sales, project management, marketing, things of that nature. So along my life, I got lucky that relationships have been pretty decent for me to build. We ended up merging with our largest reseller, who had a great project team and a great sales team, right? And subsequently, the company continued to grow. Um, and what I've found is that I don't have to be the person that knows everything. I have to be, in this case, the person that knows the why. Why do we continue to build this product?
Sorry, 1 second. They're in the call. Sorry about that. Continue, Justin.
Yeah. I have to be the person that knows the why. Why did we build the product this way? What are we trying to solve? Um, and why is our culture the way we are? You don't have to be a CEO to create the culture. Okay. So I think that's one of the things that I want to tell entrepreneurs that our product focused, are service focused, are focused on making sure that the the heart and soul of their solution continues to go forward and affect people, right? That finding the right team, um, and allowing yourself to fit in that team, right? Allowing yourself to have the humility to go, okay, you know what? I though I may understand basic EBITDA, I may understand, profit margin and things of that nature. That's not where I have to live if I want to make sure that as the next iteration of my market changes, that I'm an influencer in it and I am helping to move that market in the right direction.
Awesome. If you jump forward today, tell us what ProShip looks like today.
Okay, so ProShip, we are probably the largest multi-carrier, high-speed multi-carrier shipping software company out there, outside of the people who are just straight up API aggregators with zero cost entry points. Okay. So just an example, 2024, just about 24 billion packages were shipped in North America. We shipped about 2 billion of them. Okay. So we do have just under 10% of the executed labels. And when you consider the number of labels that are just done by people walking up to UPS or FedEx or things of that nature, there's a lot that aren't in the enterprise space that are in the mom and pop space, the individual space, the consumer space, if you will. So what we do is we help companies, mostly a lot of the companies in the NRF top 100 retailers. We help them in less than a second evaluate the customer's expectation, find the services that will meet that expectation, and select the lowest cost service that will meet or exceed that expectation. Now, this could be done in a manual sense, at the end of a pack process, there's your label. This can be done in an automated sense where you have automated scan, weigh, print, and apply solutions. So you're just running those down as fast as the conveyor will allow, and they won't fall off the corners, right? So being able to do that, what we want to ensure is that the constraint in your warehouse, the number of shipments you can execute in a day, is not limited by the shipping software itself. There will be some upstream or downstream constraint that is actually limiting how much volume you can execute per day.
Awesome. So you go, Justin, from kind of startup, you four founders, engineers, you grow to 10% share of all shipments in the US. Before we get into kind of big lessons you learned, how are you spending your time at ProShip today? What's your role? I know on your LinkedIn it has this curious title, but give us kind of how you're spending your time as founder in the organization.
Another way to put it, because LinkedIn has me as a master of eclectic obligation, which is a title that my marketing team came up with and gave to me. I have often thought that executive at large is a significantly better title. And what this means is that, like I said, I know the why, the how, the spirit. I know where we're trying to go. I also know all of the mistakes that we've made in the last 25 years. Okay. Um, so I get the privilege of being able to move from department to department as necessary. In the event we bring on a extremely large customer, somebody who's going to exceed 100 million shipments a year, somebody who wants to try to execute 3 million shipments in a day because of just the way their market works, right? I get to be involved in the design and architecture of that. I get to talk with the customers, IT folks, the operations folks, the folks that actually put the conveyor in. I get to help bring all of that together with the 25 years of knowledge as necessary. On the other hand, as we bring on board new sales folks, who else is better positioned to impart the spirit of the company to them, right? And let's face it, in this game, when you get started, it's a really quick 0 to 60, right? You've got to be and 60 miles an hour is just not fast enough for our customers. So that ability to go from department to department, like I said, kind of as an executive at large, and help continue to improve and strengthen all of the various personnel, get to know them, get to impart that to them, I think really helps to give us a level of consistency and predictability that customers like.
So Justin, there's a ton of entrepreneurs who try to grow, scale their company, face this challenge all the time. You've clearly had some progress where you've moved the organization forward, but that always comes with a challenge, problem, hurdle.
Mhm.
Um, for you in kind of that founder growth perspective, where did you first see challenge? What was the kind of early struggle?
Mm, well, of course, with building any product company, the struggle is what to say yes to and what to say no to. Okay, the no's are significantly more important than what you say yes to. When you say no, the word decision comes from some combination of Greek and Latin. It means to cut, right?
Yeah.
Like incision, right? Um, and often what you have to do is you have to make those initial decisions. In our case, we got prompted multiple times to create shipping from point of sale, which would have required that we create a point of sale product. We decided against it, right? We decided we wanted to be the engine behind the point of sale. Um, that was one of the first key major decisions that we made, which also allowed us with our go forward plan for partnerships with Manhattan, Blue Yonder, all these large companies that live in the space we wanted to get to. By not having a competing product with them, that was the best decision we made in the first 5 years. After that, there's always subsequent decisions that are continued to be to shape your company, how it partners, and how it fits in the ecosystem going forward.
So a lot of your focus this morning has been on kind of the product, the pro ship. But for you, there's kind of a, hey, four of us found it.
Mhm.
Today you've hired somebody to run the organization. There's a whole bunch of what I'll call herd. Who are all the great people surrounding us? How do we move there? Um, when you look at that structure, what were early signs or what drove you to, yeah, hey, our leadership team, the talent here, we need to change the way we think about it. What have you had to do along the way there?
That's a great question, and I don't want to oversell myself. Some of that was thrust upon us, right? We did merge, and our company has been sold. They continue to keep me on as the co-founder, continuing to be, for lack of a better term, the soul of the company. And well, I continue to help sell very well and design good product. But what I'll say is I have, and I'm just going to cut to the chase. The single most important thing I find in trying to ensure that you have a senior leadership team that works with everybody, that will grow your company in a great direction, is to viciously remove toxicity. Okay. You want to make sure that it's good to have a pessimist on the team, but there's a fine line between being a pessimist and being toxic. Okay. Um, uh, was at a trade show recently, and they had a comedian up there, and he was describing the whole yes and no but, right? And it's a lot different when you have somebody who's simply going, no, that will never work because of X, Y, and Z.
I'm just curious, was it John Colby?
I am horrible with names. I
Yeah.
don't think that name is the right name, but uh, yeah, it was interesting because it was reflective to me
Yeah.
of the decisions we've made in the past by removing the no but people, you know?
Yeah, no, and clearly, if we look at this high performing herd and look at high performance and understand that there is this, I'll call it toxicity. I talk about it, bulls that are in the ring, angry, bitter, disgruntled,
Yeah.
angry, hurting, and that we need to take action. We need to change that negative engagement to positive or move them out of the organization. You reference that you have a senior leadership team. If you look at, have you guys done that on your own? Have you had outside advisors help? How have you thought about the scale prior to acquisition and post acquisition? How you continue to think about scale with either inside or outside help?
Yeah, communication is extremely important here. Um, when it comes to forming the culture of a senior team, making sure that you have earned the trust of by not being toxic yourself, making sure you've earned the trust of the other senior executives. Okay. So in the event, you've got an executive, even if you got a middle manager, right, that you're seeing is in the center of that ring, angry and poking horns at everybody, so to speak, right? That you can determine, can we intervene or do we just have to terminate, right? And I will say, I think that's one of the things that is the difference between a great contributor and a leader. A leader knows when to push for termination. Okay. There's just some times where no matter how good the good is, um, if they're just leaking toxicity, if you start to hear other management and frontline personnel starting to repeat those negativisms from that person, you realize that toxicity is leaking out and you owe it to the rest of the company to intervene or terminate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, well, there's clearly, can we inspire, get better behavior, coach, all the things
Yep.
that happen before termination. Um, if you look at kind of the how you've built that high performance team, w- I understand the toxicity, but there's also typically like a how do I inspire them to believe? Here's where we're
Mhm.
headed as an organization, kind of what we call typical entrepreneurial visionary or vision. What was early in ProShip and what's persisted in kind of that vision forward of why we're here, what we do, how do we get everyone to pull hard? What's kind of the essence behind that?
So there's really two things that almost everybody clicks with one of these two things in our organization. Either number one, I talked about 2 billion labels a year. Okay. That's not just retailers, that's pharmaceuticals, that's manufacturers. These things, on one end of the spectrum, we're delivering Christmas. We're
Sure.
delivering that birthday joy. Okay. Um, and therefore you're having an impact on the world. Okay. A lot of people are driven by that. A lot of people want to say, if I make a change, if I correct something, how many people's lives will I touch? Okay. And that's one of the things that really motivates people that comes here. Now, another one is a little bit more personal. How do I affect, how do I have a large effect on people's quality of life over time? And that's usually our personnel that are going to be in the lower, upper, and middle management positions, right?
Yeah.
And for them, encouraging them, and I think that's one of the things we've got a great culture of is how do you teach somebody who's interested in learning how to do your job to eventually take over your job? How do you continue that go forward process of training your replacement so that you can move up in the chain? Okay. And that's the other motivator, whether it's how many thousands of lives per minute I'm touching, or it's how am I really touching and changing the quality of the personnel who work for me.
Yeah.
And that's something that in the interview process, I will often try to suss out on personnel when I'm in that interview, right? Because it builds a great, strong culture. You hear me keep going back to culture, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think that it's extremely important. Because if you have a strong culture, and you're like we are, where we have a peak every year, a time where everybody from the newest employee all the way to myself is feeling the extra stress. The everything is more critical in these last 3 months of the year than they are at any other point in time, right? And if you've got a great culture, that culture will allow you to absorb that stress, use it for to improve the product and the processes, and reflect away the negativity. Okay. So that, am I saying we never get testy with one another? No, I'm not. But I'm saying we're generally productive. And even though every year we know we're going to have the equivalent of a blizzard, okay, the equivalent of a hurricane,
Yeah.
we're prepared for it and we get through it. And a lot of that comes back to the culture.
So typically, kind of that, Justin, comes from vision that we talked about. So, like, hey, we're impacting the world, we're getting shipments there, we're making Christmas happen, all of those things. But it also usually takes hold in a cultural element, core values. Here's how we want people to act and behave. This is the way we act and behave here. Is that spelled out at ProShip? Is it specific? Here's how our core values are written. Here's what we have. Here's how we do want people to act and behave. Or is it less written, more just lived?
I was going to say it's lived. Okay. The fact that our president will be on a call at 3 a.m. checking in on a system down solution, asking if there's anything he can do to help. Making sure that if it's time to turn people over, all the way up to the very top, right? And because that comes from the senior leadership down, because we're not just like, we'll deal with it in the morning. That sounds like a rank and file problem.
Yep.
Um, because there is no separation, there is no that's not the word I'm looking for, but basically because we're willing to go in and run interference with the executives on the other side to free up our personnel who are actually doing the job, the hands on keyboard. They feel protected. They feel like we're in it for them, and I don't know that they feel like we actually understand everything that they're doing because, well, let's face it, there's always going to be a knowledge differential. But I I I am under the impression that our team feels like they're being appropriately protected, especially from the negativity that can come when millions of dollars per hour are at stake in a down situation.
So what I hear is more implicit than explicit. That hey,
Absolutely.
we have these
Yep.
core values. Here's how we act and behave. We model it.
Hmm.
You guys contemplated more explicit, like, hey, should we tell about? Here's the vision. And the example I always use, Justin, is Southwest Airlines. Now we
Hmm.
could look at Southwest Airlines today, but in the past, it was to connect people with what's most important in their lives. We're going to be a warrior spirit, servant's heart, fun loving attitude, and they lived those core values. And I think they moved away from it. And the reason I challenge you to think about it is, will more explicit define the behavior? Will we have more consistent? Can we shape, coach, and modify when it's more implicit? Hey, we have to lead, and people have some question of clarity. And
Hmm.
so for you guys, it may be no, it's very implicit. It's there. We talk about it. It's evident. Or, as an organization in the next step, when you think about next stage of growth, how do we become even bigger? What are the ways in which we bring, this whole thing is about how I have a more high performing herd. How do I get the most from everyone? There's thought there. And I'll just let you chew on it and go, well, where
Hmm.
are we in that journey? How are we doing it? What's there? What would you say?
So I think that your challenge is correct and valuable. What I will also say is because we have not had the time to do it, and because right now our culture continues to move in a positive direction, um, uh, it's okay to skip some things at times, right? And
Yeah,
I
I mean, we
think
we we have limited hours in the day, and I get it, and
exactly,
and,
exactly.
I go back to, in my view, though, that culture matters. We can look at
Mhm,
sports and all those things, and you brought it up, and it's a way to think and go, "Well, what would it look like if it were improved alongside other things we're doing around product design, growth?" If we had a more powerful team here and the magnet was stronger and we were attracting even better talent, what would happen for ProShip?
yep,
And, that's a journey for us all the time. That's, no matter how good we are as a sports team, if we look at it, we go, well, how do we attract the next, A level talent? How do we find them? What's the next A player we can bring onto the team? And, there's my view, at least, Justin, is the more explicit, the easier that is to do. We can tell people, here's what it is, here's how we all act and behave. And what I've found working with organizations and seen is where explicit, that becomes kind of the magnet. It says, hey, we're there. So that's something to think about. When you think about ProShip in the next stage of growth,
uh-huh.
what has to change with, I'll call it you, the team, leadership to get to that next stage?
So for us, our next stage is really becoming more ubiquitous with the partners that will already be at our customers. That includes both the software stack as well as the carriers themselves. That latter one becomes a little bit more difficult because, in case you haven't noticed, every day there seems to be three new carriers, right?
Yep.
Um, and I will say that being able to solve a problem, I already harped on communication. I cannot press that enough. Um, and that communication goes in multiple directions. In our case, it goes internally, it's the customer, it's the carrier partners, and it's the enterprise software stack partners, right? So that's a lot of different directions that you have to make sure you've got great communication. And I think that is where, as we come out of this post-pandemic network, right, where everybody had too much capacity, you see some capacity changing. We still see new carriers coming in with unique capacities, right? Um, uh, Communication with the carriers leads to understanding of their offerings. Understanding of their offerings leads to greater value to the customers. Greater values to the customers means we're probably going to have to integrate deeper into more of the enterprise software stack, which means we have to. So you can see how by making it easier to communicate, do all those pieces of communication, we will produce a better solution for our customers. And I think that's really where we're focused, especially as the legacy carriers, the big three in the United States, really start to shift. You know, they're aircraft carrier, they're huge, they're an oil tanker. As they start to turn their boats in this new direction to compete better with the newer, lighter, fleeter carriers out there, communication is number one all the way around for everything. So, what we don't know is where things are going to change. I often like people like Elon Musk who say, reason from first principle, right? It's a great engineering way. It's a great way to create products, a great way to solve problems. Um, but in our world, first principles are often dictated by the carriers themselves, right? We have to follow their rules or they don't deliver the package. They find the customers, so on and so forth. So that communication helps you understand your first principles. Understanding your first principles helps you create the right solution or solve a problem when it exists. So that's where we're continuing to push right now, is that communication piece.
So, in that, I'll call it communication, if done well, what kind of growth will ProShip see likely in the next 3 to 5 years? What should happen?
Um, our goal is continuously low double digits. Okay. We are not looking to grow at 40, 50% per year. That is not that is one thing I will say about our current ownership structure. That's not what they want. They want sustainable growth over decades. They are a buy and hold for life, which makes it a lot easier for somebody like myself to continue to have influence. Again, you don't have to be that entrepreneur that gains, does all the VC money and do all these. There are options out there. I'm lucky. I've fallen into one that allows me to continue to influence. And they have reasonable goals for us. Okay. We're not trying to become the next Oracle. That is not part of our business. Likewise, they won't let us create point of sale software anymore. I mentioned that early decision,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If we tried to do that, they'd be like, you better give me a really great business plan and explain to me why this is worth it. So, because we have that freedom and because we have reasonable expectations, it's steady, continuous growth. It is customer retention, and it is and what that means is that the customers that we onboarded 20 years ago that still love us continue to be net promoters in the industry as their personnel rotate out into promotions into other companies. They bring that net promoter feeling to other companies, and it allows us to continuously expand at a nice controllable level such that quality continues to be a key factor to retain our largest customers as well as our newest smallest customers.
So I'm sure kind of in the journey you've had from what we'll call it early days to now, new ownership, this kind of, we'll call it low double digit growth.
Mhm.
If you start to think about that, there's always the challenge of, well, do we solve it internally? Do we bring in outside resource? What's the balance? How have you thought about that through the career? Where are you at now in that journey? Kind of what's the internal, external? This always is, I always call it farm team versus higher stars, whether that's talent we bring on, whether that's vendor partner, whether that's
Mhm.
consultant? How have you guys viewed that, and what's your view today?
Um, so a lot of it, we get lucky that we get to look at the talent pool, right? It always seems like we have the opportunity to hire and grow. So we continue to see what is out there in the market, what skill set we can pick up. Um, Again, be having been in the technology field for the last 25 years, we've got a good handle on technology, what we're good at and what we're not. Okay. We are You asked for a vision, and we don't exactly have a company vision, but we have a product vision, right? Which is to be the best small parcel shipment execution
Mhm.
into LTL, right? So because of that product vision, it does kind of cap what we're going to do. So we're not going to add inventory. These are things that are inventory would be very adjacent to what we do,
Yeah.
right? We may or may not add a certain amount of tracking capability or AI based tracking. These are things that we are actively evaluating, and while I'll be quite honest with you, how do you evaluate some of these things, partner versus build? You create a small tiger team, to see what you can build, get the lessons learned, because then when you go to partner, you already know the parts that were difficult for you, you know
Yeah.
the parts that were easy for you, so now when you're communicating with somebody, it's like, "So, how did you solve challenge A, and how did that reflect on challenge B?" So for us, by spending a little time, maybe it's 100 man hours, maybe it's 1,000 man hours, right? On figuring out what we don't know, it becomes a lot easier for us to go, okay, well, that was a great experiment, lesson learned. We now know how to partner, or, oh, that was a significantly easier than we expected. We see great value in here, and we see a force multiplier for our product. So we're going to continue to do the hard work internally, and we'll start hiring into this particular skill set.
So Justin is founder, kind of still very involved with the company. It's growing. If you look and go, hey, either leadership team, something about the business, if you could take the proverbial magic wand and change it tomorrow and go, man, this would make us better, more effective. What kind of things do you think about there? It doesn't have to be the one thing, but what do you think about where you go, man, this would make us that much better?
It's always about tech debt, right? As an IT company or as a software engineering company, if you're not thinking about tech debt, you're going to get overwhelmed eventually. Okay, especially if you're a young company, if you're less than 5 years old, you don't realize that you have made a lot of decisions that are borrowing time from the future. Okay, um, and just like anybody who handles a lot of money, right? You have to know which bills to pay off first. Tech debt is probably one of the most insidious things in a product technical product organization, because figuring out which tech debt is worth it to pay down and which tech debt might be in like a product that you're going to sunset and replace with a whole new stack. That's
Yeah.
probably the easiest way to look at well, clearly, if I'm going to sunset this in a year, why pay down the tech debt inside of it? Focus on creating the newer, better product. I think that that is the one thing, especially as a tech entrepreneur, that I would tell somebody is, you think you don't have any tech debt? You are wrong. Okay. You can't write more than 10 lines of code without incurring some tech debt.
Yeah, so you're probably talking about real and we'll call it, hey, the decision binds me to something that has a
Yep.
cost.
Yep.
Um, and so when you think about that in terms of ongoing architecture, is that what you're talking about? Like, well,
Yep.
yeah, hey, we have to look at this, and even though we may not be using that architecture, we're still living with it.
You
And
are.
and and is there, and this is just because that's not where I'm real familiar, Justin. Is there actual debt associated? Like, yeah, hey, we have investment into this technology that we are paying down, or is it more the former where it's like, yeah, this just impacts everything we do?
It is one where you should be paying it down. If you are a software engineering company and you don't have personnel going into product and paying down that tech debt, you may think of it as simple refactoring, right? Um, but here's the thing, so for example, when we started, people were just moving to XML, We could have gone with proprietary, comma separated, semicolon, proprietary data structure to pass back and forth. We chose XML. Now XML is considered antiquated, so we're
Yeah,
moving to JSON, right? Now, how we implemented reading from our XML could make it very difficult for us to switch over
got
to
it.
JSON. That's the tech debt. That's more obvious tech debt, but there are 1,000 little decisions that your developers make every single day.
Yeah,
Okay. In some ways, right, microarchitectures and things of that nature help to isolate your tech debt a little bit, but even the architecture of the orchestration throughout uh, containerized solutions, even that architecture in and of itself can create tech debt in the future. So if you're not continuously thinking about it, if you're not thinking about how do I maintain my tech debt at the lowest level? We don't want to overpay it. Like I said, eventually some of these components may just be thrown out. They may just have no value in the market. So why would you have something completely clean when you can easily keep 400 hours of tech debt in there and throw it away? And that's debt you never have to pay back. So that is from a technology company. Even if all you do is have a website, you're going to have tech debt.
got it.
Okay.
So, as we move toward kind of wrapping up, when you picture ProShip a year or two from now, what does wild success look like, and how will you feel about leading the company there?
Mm. Wild success is two factor growth and retention. Okay. I would like to have another third of the National Retail Federation top 100 retailers. That would be wild success. I would also like to maintain a sub 3% turnover ratio.
Got it.
Okay.
And turnover meaning client churn.
Yeah. Client churn.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, and a lot of that for us comes due to acquisition. And when one of our customers buys the other customer, we lose a customer.
yeah, yeah. Believe me, that's many industries.
Yep.
Um, for other leaders who have lived through this or will live through it, Justin, it's always this harnessing the power of our herd is about what have we learned about multiplying results? What have we learned about getting more from people? What have we learned about, hey, I'm getting more done with fewer hours invested personally, that I'm just more effective as a leader, my team's better. What would you share with others about what you've learned with regard to that and kind of the climb you've had with ProShip?
If I had to say it in a short elevator blurb, learn how to teach.
Mm,
Um, the reason I'm saying that is because if it's only in your mind, you are a linchpin in a positive and a negative way. If you learn to teach your thought processes, if you learn to teach the principles, if you learn to teach the troubleshooting technique, whatever it is that makes you super unique, okay? I've always said I have replaced myself more than 10 times in this company. And every time I replace myself, they find another job for me. Okay. And honestly, if I replace myself and they didn't have another job for me, I probably don't belong here anymore. I could go somewhere else, start teaching them, and have a great effect. And so that's for me. If you can teach people how to do what you're doing, if you can teach them the philosophies and the principles so that they can stand on their own, you've done a force multiplier because now you can communicate to them in small, concise sentences. They can take over from there and you can focus on the next bit, right? Whether this is in a troubleshooting situation or whether this is in a growth situation, a sales situation, overall moving the company. I have found no better skill in my arsenal than my ability to teach what I'm thinking and my philosophies just to somebody else.
yeah, no, it's funny because many of you we manage, and I'm like, no, we coach, we teach, and so the more we take that mindset, which is, I think inspire action towards something better, is the path. So, Justin, if listeners want more about your journey, more about ProShip, where should they go?
Well, first, ProShipInc.com. This is where you're going to find all things about ProShip. My marketing team has done a great job of overhyping me. Probably not nearly as great as they try to make me out to be. Of course, you can find me on LinkedIn. Justin.Cramer would be my, and that's Kramer with a C, would be where you'd find me there. And of course, you can find me on the regular socials. But yeah, ProShipInc.com is a great place to start looking not only for me, but also all of the information on the philosophies that have helped to build our company.
Awesome, Justin. It's been fantastic having you. Really appreciate you being so candid, sharing with the journey. We always like diving into how people actually done this. How have they climbed from something small start to something more remarkable? And almost always it's harnessing the power of your herd, which clearly you guys have done and still have room to grow on that journey, which is for all of us always the case. So thanks. Really appreciate your time, Justin. Take care.
Thanks for having me.